Being that it's February, I wanted to show some love to my favorite kaiju by reviewing their vinyl figures. My previous video, I put the spotlight on Baragon. Today, I'm completing my holy trinity of Toho kaiju that started with Ibira, with my number one beastie, Playmates Toho Series 1956 Rodan.
In the crust beneath the crater here, there's the monster Rodan.
As a kid, Godzilla films were my jam, and as much as I rooted for the king of the monsters, I always found his sometimes foe, sometimes ally, the red flying kaiju Rodan, a fixation of mine. Rodan, for a good part of the Showa era, seemed to bring some levity to the monster action, often bringing in some comic relief, specifically in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. There, he mocks both Godzilla in battle and humankind when faced to side with them to fight the titular kaiju. When he finally accepts that request, Rodan holds his own, slapping Ghidorah with his talons and ramming him headfirst in flight. Comically, he also draws Ghidorah's gravity beam attention by hiding behind some rocks, peeking up to see if the coast is clear. When kaiju enthusiasts mention what differentiates them from standard monsters, they usually make a point to address that these creatures have distinct personalities. Rodan is a class clown of them all. But Rodan didn't start out that way. His 1956 debut film was much more akin to a horror film in tone. Moments of anxious terror peppered the film when he terrorizes a Japanese mining town after hatching, using his supersonic speed when he flies to cause multiple human casualties. Later in the film, he descends upon a city, causing hurricane-level windstorms to beat back the military opposition. Faced with hopelessness, humankind decides to take the fight to him and his mate, condemning both to a fiery death by triggering a volcanic eruption. This is my favorite interpretation of Rodan. He is a monster, just like his fellow Monster Island inhabitants. Since his original film, Rodan has made several appearances and cameos in Godzilla films, often aiding Godzilla in his fight with Ghidorah, or just chilling on Monster Island snacking on dolphins. As the Showa era continued, he became less common as newer and shinier allies were set to ally with the Big G. But in the 90s Heisei era, Rodan returned to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, this time realized not as a man in suit, but a rigid puppet, downscaled to push the idea that he was just an irradiated pteranodon. This is my least favorite version of the kaiju, who undergoes an upgrade to Fire Rodan, outfitted with a beam weapon, as all the kaiju in that series usually do. That, coupled with the awkward prop effects, surrogate personality, and passive design, add up to a disappointment. Rodan once again returned to Final Wars in a much better design and suit. However, unconvincing, CGI also realized him, and when it came time for him to fight Godzilla, he was nothing more than a flying prop. He again, like most other of his monster co-stars, were underutilized in what could have been a massive monster mash spectacle. I'll leave that opinion right there. His best on-screen representation was in the MonsterVerse movie, Godzilla King of the Monsters. Encapsulating the finest moment that this series has had to offer thus far, Rodan is back in pure form as the volcanic inhabiting creature who decimates a city with his flyby aftershock, bests military jets, and maintains his malleable side-switching allegiances. With the limited screen time, Michael Dougherty managed to perfectly capture the essence of the samurai of the skies. But enough of my rambling, let's get to why we're here. This figure, based off of his original 1956 rendition. Playmates' last round of Toho series figures all seemed to massively improve just as the line changed lanes to be more Monsterverse focused. I had that old Bandai Rodan, also from his 1956 design. It was one of my favorites of the older, larger scaled vinyls. The question here is the Playmates version worth the purchase if you already have it? Let's find out. I must admit, I can be a bit of a Rodan shill. Like Baragon, he's a kaiju I have no problem buying the latest version of, even when the results are less than stellar. Playmates Baragon! So, when I swooped this up from my local Target, I had a feeling of, did I really need this? Upon closer inspection, yes. Yes, I did. Playmates' offering is very similar to the old Bandai one, in terms of colors and specifically where said colors are applied. The base mold is the rust red from head to toe, and he's adorned with metallic gold sprays in the same areas as his previous figure. The thorny chest, the fingers, his toes and beak, and even his horned crest. His eyes, still that cold, lifeless black void as the original. What is different about his head is the open beak, giving us a look at a brighter red tongue. On his backside, Rodan has that same metallic bluish-green spray down his spine, laced again with the metallic gold, just like his Bandai version from the 90s. I always thought that this paint app was interesting because I have yet to see that clearly on any screenshots of that costume, so I can't decide if this is a legit detail. Speaking of deets, the sculpting is superb. With Playmates, there is usually always something off about their molds. Their Baragon had that warped head, and even their Gorosaurus looks odd when viewing him face on. Rodan, however, looks great, and is made greater by the various textures about his whole. From the wonderfully sculpted chest, the rigid legs, and the pleated wings, all in varying degrees of bumpy to smooth surfaces, this guy is aces. And when it comes to sculpt, this Rodan is different from the Bandai release. The older version was vanilla in terms of posing, because, well, he really wasn't posed. But Playmates does some things to give the figure some life. I already mentioned his gaping mouth, which is refreshing, since the older one is sealed shut. But his legs are spread out more, not standing to attention. It's nice because even though I don't have any problem standing either, this feels more natural. Finally, the decision to curl the top of his left wing is a nice touch and really brings home that this is no carbon copy of the original figure. This already sets the presentation in a way that is more interesting on display, so if you were to ask me which I prefer, I will already have this take as my vote. Playmates, like Bandai, are faced with the dilemma of making a flying creature posable. On the older release, the wings did have a socket to which, with some effort, you could shift their positions. It's hard to imagine that a company known for its minimal articulation these days went out of their way to attempt this years ago. Playmates did not do this, unfortunately, and all you really get is a phenomenal neck joint. The lack of articulation in the wings is not bad, since the sculpt suggests movement with a curved edge. So, with all this talk about the Bandai version, I will of course start with him. You can see the similarities here with paint apps and vinyl colors. It's an exact replication, but Playmates ups the presentation with an open-mouthed head and slightly more posed appendages, breathing some life into the figure. The added plus is its scale that makes him a nice addition to your monster display if you prefer the smaller Movie Monster Series line. And just because I mentioned him, I have the smaller Final Wars version to compare with him. This is more to give you an idea how he'd look if you were a Rodan enthusiast like me and want to see how they look together. Obvious design and color differences aside, this is cool to see a modern take on him. And finally, another previously mentioned version, I have my son's Armorizer Rodan figure. Despite my focus on old school Kaiju, I do love this Playmates rendition of him, and I think this would have made for a great standard vinyl figure, without all those hideous green armor plates you can fold out. And here's the group shot. I should mention that I do have a Fire Rodan. In fact, I have two, the original larger fuchsia one and the smaller red one that came out a few years ago by Bandai. Both are in storage, which I'm fine with because he's my least favorite version. Playmates Rodan is an excellent figure. Not only is he a downscaled version of the 56 version to fit in well with your other Movie Monster Series figures, but he also benefits from an alternate sculpt posture. The only downside I can think of is that you may not be interested in the original look of this guy if you're seeking a faithful Monster Island assembly. He doesn't have the comedic look as you would have in the later Showa films, so if you're looking for that, this guy may not be your cup of joe. But I, too, must take a measured look at this from an unbiased standpoint, so, naturally, I'll have someone else rate it. You know what to do, JJ.
Punch, 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 punch!
With 6 punches being the best, why only 4 punches? Coming from a guy who loves Rodan? Let me explain. This is a great figure, and there really is no harsh criticism to be had. I could argue that 1 point of articulation is a massive detractor, considering that even Bandai in their heyday managed to include posable wings. Even then, he's still damn good. For what he is, a glorified statue. There's no real wow factor to this guy. He won't pop off your display like, say, Titanosaurus or Anguirus 55. His similarity in appearance from the older 90s figure also might make you give pause to this update, but I really don't see that being a serious issue. In terms of the Playmates track record, he's one of their best. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me rant and rave about Rodan. If you enjoyed this or any of my other videos, please do me a favor and like this video, comment down below on what you think, share it if you desire, and please subscribe. I love the world of Godzilla and would like to continue expressing my appreciation for this genre, and I'll only continue as long as the interest is there. Let's all support not just my channel, but all channels like this, so we can continue to see kaiju-related media increase. This is 4Green, signing off.
Oh, I'm scared. Come on, I want to go home.
Oh, she's crazy.